Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a set of sources, dig in, and really try to pull out the key insights you need on a topic.
That's right. And today we're diving into a chapter that analyzes the long-term impact, the consequences of decisions made by the baby boomer generation in Japan.
Yeah, our mission here is to unpack the environmental, social, economic, and organizational legacies they've left behind. Basically give you a shortcut to understanding this really pivotal period.
Exactly. And the source material we're looking at, it specifically frames this as the negative legacy. So we'll be exploring things like, environmental issues, social inequality,
Mm,
resistance to innovation, organizational rigidity, that kind of thing,
hmm.
stalled careers for younger people, the overwork culture.
Which is a big one.
Oh, huge.
Mm.
Plus, internal politics, not adapting well to, say, global changes,
Hmm.
and just how hard it is to make big reforms. And ultimately, the burden this all places on, well, future generations.
So the goal for you listening is to get a clear handle on these pretty significant interconnected challenges that the chapter identifies. We want to pull out the essentials so you can see the bigger picture, efficiently. Let's start with the environment.
Okay. So the chapter really emphasizes that Japan's rapid post-war economic growth, I mean, it was incredibly successful in many ways, but it was
Wow.
built on this foundation of mass production, mass consumption,
Right.
without really factoring in the environmental cost. The key idea here is that, well, the short-term economic focus of one generation has created some serious long-term environmental debts for the next.
And those debts were pretty substantial, weren't they? The chapter talks about significant pollution, air, water, soil,
Yeah.
which tragically led to horrible pollution-related diseases, things like Yokkaichi asthma, Minamata disease. These left, lasting scars.
Devastating.
And all that rapid industrial growth also meant pushing for urban expansion. So you had deforestation, farmland being converted.
Loss of green spaces, wetlands.
Mhm.
It disrupted ecosystems and, well, played into the bigger climate change picture, too.
The underlying thing seems to be this prioritization, right? Economic success just trumped environmental concerns during that period.
Absolutely. And the sheer amount of waste from all that mass consumption just made things worse.
But the chapter does look forward to. It talks about potential shifts, like moving towards sustainable growth.
Oh, so.
Well, by rethinking mass production, pushing for resource efficiency, the whole circular economy idea.
Right, keeping resources in use.
Exactly. And really going after renewable energy, improving waste recycling, basically trying to find policies that balance environmental protection with economic growth.
So it's not just policy, though. Businesses have a role.
Oh, definitely. The chapter stresses the need for businesses to actually integrate environmental thinking into how they operate. And of course, education and public awareness are crucial to make any of this stick society-wide. Makes sense. It's like acknowledging that environmental debt and figuring out how to pay it back, essentially. Okay, let's shift gears. Another big theme was growing social inequality.
Yes, that's right. It's sort of paradoxical. This era of huge economic prosperity actually saw social inequality increase quite notably.
And the chapter connects this back to some of those core structures at the time, doesn't it? Like the seniority-based promotion system.
Exactly. That and the lifetime employment system. While they offered stability for some, the chapter argues they also protected, well, vested interests and ended up creating unequal opportunities, especially for younger people and definitely for non-regular workers.
Those contract or part-time workers, right.
Yeah.
Often fewer benefits, less security.
Precisely. Because advancement was so heavily tied to years of service, not necessarily, merit or skill, so younger talent could get held back. And the chapter is quite clear about discriminatory treatment towards non-regular workers or people hired outside that traditional graduate pipeline.
And what about women and minorities?
Also highlighted, within what was a very male-dominated corporate culture, they faced significant barriers to getting ahead, reaching leadership positions. It just wasn't a level playing field.
So this inequality wasn't just unfair to individuals. It actually hurt the economy, too.
Yeah, the chapter makes that link. Unbalanced income distribution, a shrinking middle class
Yeah.
that can slow down consumer spending and overall economic activity. Plus, the social friction it creates, divisions, dissatisfaction.
So what are the proposed fixes? Is it just about ditching seniority?
Well, that's part of it. Revising those systems, bringing in more merit-based evaluations, but also significantly improving the treatment and support for non-regular workers. And then there's the whole piece around actively fighting discrimination, promoting gender equality.
Laws and policies.
Yes, anti-discrimination laws,
Hmm.
but also fostering genuinely inclusive environments within companies. And again, like with the environment, education and awareness are seen as key to challenging those ingrained prejudices.
So, tackling inequalities isn't just about fairness, it's actually vital for social stability and economic health in the long run.
Precisely. It needs that kind of multi-pronged approach, system changes, company changes, individual awareness. Okay, shall we move on to the next challenge? Resistance to technological innovation.
Right. The chapter suggests that the very success of that earlier industrial model, the one the baby boomers built, actually made organizations kind of reluctant to embrace new tech, new ways of doing business.
That's a good way to put it. It's like past success bred this, if it ain't broke, don't fix it attitude. Why change what worked so well before?
Even if the world was changing around them.
Exactly. And the chapter points out that the typical top-down organizational structure didn't help either. Ideas bubbling up from the front lines often didn't get much traction higher up, especially if senior management maybe didn't fully grasp the new technologies themselves.
So, what were the consequences of digging their heels in like that?
Well, declining organizational efficiency, for one, losing competitiveness. But also, it impacts the employees, right? It can stifle creativity. And you risk losing talented people who want to be somewhere more, well, forward-thinking.
Yeah, I can see that. So, how do you break that cycle? What does the chapter suggest?
A big one is a shift in leadership mindset. Leaders need to actually champion innovation, create a culture where it's genuinely valued. And that means, learning about new tech themselves, being open to ideas from below.
It's not just about attitude, though, is it? Needs structure.
Absolutely. Building systems to support innovation, ways to test ideas, evaluate them properly, scale them up if they work, and crucially, investing in employee skills,
Mm.
education and training so people feel comfortable using new tech, not resistant to it.
So, it's about becoming more flexible overall.
That's the core argument, I think. Increasing organizational flexibility, adaptability, being willing to challenge old assumptions, embrace change, and really foster that collaboration between leadership and the workforce to move forward.
Okay, so that resistance, rooted in past success, really held things back. Let's talk about a related point: organizational rigidity.
Yeah, it flows directly from that resistance, doesn't it?
Hmm.
The chapter talks about how authoritarian leadership styles and those really strict hierarchies, common back then, led to very rigid organizations, hard to change course quickly.
Makes sense. If information only flows top down and decisions need multiple sign-offs.
Exactly. It slows everything down. Flexible decision-making, responding fast to market shifts, really difficult in that kind of setup. And clinging to those old successful models just reinforce the rigidity.
And what about the impact on people working in those environments?
Well, motivation can take a hit, right? If you feel like you can't contribute ideas, or if promotions seem based purely on how long you've been there, not what you achieve,
Wow.
it can be quite demoralizing. Younger, ambitious people might just leave.
Stifling initiative. So how does the chapter suggest tackling this kind of deep-seated rigidity?
It points towards fundamentally rethinking the structures themselves, moving away from pure top-down, maybe adopting flatter structures to get information flowing better, empower teams more.
But it's more than just boxes on an org chart, surely.
Oh, completely. A big part is the leadership style, shifting away from being authoritarian towards more open communication, building trust. And again, skills training is important, equipping people to work in a potentially more agile way.
And fostering a different kind of culture.
Yes, one that actually embraces challenges, sees failures as learning opportunities, not something to be punished. It's a whole package deal, really structure, leadership skills, culture.
Right. Dismantling rigidity needs that kind of comprehensive approach. Okay, let's zoom in on how these factors specifically affected younger employees' careers. That was another key theme.
Yes, the chapter really argues that those seniority systems and the whole lifetime employment model, they significantly held back younger, talented people. Opportunities for early promotion or even just fully using their skills were often limited.
That must have been incredibly frustrating. You have the potential, but you're stuck waiting your turn, basically.
Exactly. And the chapter says this often led to lower motivation, less engagement among younger staff, plus being locked into a specific role for a long time under lifetime employment meant fewer chances to gain new skills or face different challenges.
And the culture reinforced this, the sort of baby boomer values.
Yeah, the text suggests those top-down, maybe more authoritarian work environments, made it harder for young people to even voice opinions, let alone showcase their abilities. Easy for talent to get overlooked.
And what were the consequences for the organizations themselves, beyond frustrated young employees?
Well, declining competitiveness again, higher turnover as young talent leaves, and crucially, a lack of fresh perspectives, diverse thinking, which you absolutely need for innovation and growth.
So what's the proposed path forward here? Performance reviews.
That's a big part of it. Moving towards performance-based, merit-based evaluations that actually recognize contributions, regardless of age. Also, giving people diverse experiences, job rotations, project work to help them develop.
And changing the culture to be more welcoming of their input.
Definitely. Creating cultures that genuinely value what younger employees bring, supporting their development through training, mentorship. It's about creating an environment where their potential can actually flourish.
It sounds like investing in young talent isn't just good for them, it's essential for the organization's future health.
The chapter makes that case very strongly. When leadership actively supports their growth, you build a much stronger pipeline and a more dynamic organization overall.
Okay, we're definitely seeing a pattern here of older systems creating hurdles. Let's shift to another really ingrained aspect, the overwork culture.
Ah, yes, a huge one. The chapter describes this, well, deeply embedded value system where excessive work hours are almost seen as virtuous. It led to this pervasive culture where long hours and high stress became almost the norm, the expectation.
And the roots go way back, right, to that post-war boom.
Exactly. Putting in incredible long hours was seen as a contribution, a kind of self-sacrifice for the company, for the nation's recovery. That idea got really deeply ingrained.
And it just persisted. Why didn't it change?
Largely, the chapter argues, because workplace environments and management styles didn't fundamentally change enough. In many places, processes are still tied to long hours, and unfortunately, putting in face time can still be seen as a measure of loyalty or effort, even if it's not productive.
The human cost must be enormous. The chapter talks about health issues.
Oh, absolutely. Serious health problems, the tragic phenomenon of karoshi death from overwork depression, takes a massive toll on individuals. And then there are the societal costs. Lower overall productivity despite the long hours, rising medical expenses, the impact on family life.
So what's the way out? How does the chapter suggest tackling something so ingrained?
Again, leadership is key. A fundamental shift where leaders genuinely prioritize employee health and well-being and focus on efficient work, not just long hours. Smarter work, not just harder work.
And systemic changes, too, like enforcing labor laws.
Crucial. Rigorous enforcement, maybe stronger penalties for violations, plus promoting flexible work options, telework, different schedules, giving employees more control.
And challenging the mindset itself.
Yes, through education and awareness campaigns, both within companies to talk about work-life balance and society-wide, to chip away at that idea that overwork is somehow noble.
Does it also mention the role of individuals?
It does, encouraging workers to be more aware of their own habits, manage their time better, and importantly, feel able to speak up about excessive workloads without fear. It really requires a collective effort, management, employees, government, to shift this.
A huge societal challenge. Okay, let's look inside organizations again. In-house politics, that was another point raised.
Yes, the chapter suggests that strong internal politics, even factionalism, became quite influential in how organizations were managed. The environment described is one where, often, relationships and maneuvering could count for more than actual ability.
So it's about who you know, which faction you belong to.
That seems to be the dynamic described. And the chapter links this back to those hierarchical, top-down structures again. Loyalty to superiors, aligning with the right internal group, these could become critical for getting ahead.
What are the downsides of that kind of environment? Seems pretty inefficient.
Very much so. The chapter points to decreased efficiency, lower productivity because energy goes into politics instead of work. It can also drive away talented people who don't want to play those games, and it erodes trust.
And decision-making must get compromised, too, if factions are fighting.
Definitely. Delays, suboptimal choices because of internal power struggles rather than what's best for the organization. The overall direction can get murky.
So how do you clean that up? What does the chapter propose?
Management commitment to transparency and fairness is number one. Implementing clear, performance-based evaluations, trying to insulate them from political influence.
In better communication.
Yes, fostering open communication where people feel safe raising issues. Training leaders to make objective decisions, free from bias. and fundamentally shifting the culture towards valuing meritocracy and teamwork over politicking.
Any other strategies mentioned?
Bringing in outside perspectives can help break up internal cliques. So actively hiring diverse talent, seeking external advice, trying to create a more level playing field based on contribution, not connections.
Right, making ability the main currency again. Okay, let's broaden the view again. Lack of adaptability to the external environment.
This is a big one the chapter highlights. A noticeable delay in adapting to major shifts like globalization, digitalization, and the consequence was often a decline in international competitiveness for Japanese firms.
And this links back to clinging to old models.
Yes, that excessive reliance on what worked during the post-war boom, even when those models were becoming obsolete globally. It hampered their ability to pivot.
And the internal rigidity we discussed played a role here too.
Absolutely. Those rigid structures, the slow, top-down decision-making, they made it hard to respond quickly to external changes. Plus, the chapter mentions insufficient investment in training employees in the new skills needed, and maybe even knowledge gaps about new trends at the management level.
What were the wider impacts of this slow adaptation beyond individual companies?
Well, societal effects too. Things like fewer job opportunities in lighting sectors, regional economic stagnation if local industries couldn't keep up, and falling behind digitally means potentially not meeting customer needs anymore.
So what's the proposed solution? How do organizations become more adaptable?
Management needs a proactive attitude towards change, really trying to understand new trends, new tech, and communicating why adaptability is vital. Plus, making those structural changes towards more flexibility, better information flow.
And investing in people.
Critically important. Human resource development focused on digital skills, global communication. The chapter also suggests using external experts, leveraging tech like data analytics, AI, to understand the environment better.
And again, that cultural piece comes up.
Yes, fostering a culture that embraces challenges, learns from mistakes, rather than just sticking to the past. It's about building that continuous learning mindset.
Okay, so adaptability requires changes on multiple fronts. Now let's talk about the difficulty of making those big changes, what the chapter calls radical surgery.
Right. Reforming these deep-seated structures, it often requires really significant, almost painful changes. And unsurprisingly, that kind of change faces a lot of internal resistance.
Why is the resistance so strong?
A key reason highlighted is vested interests. People who benefit from the current system, their status, their perks, they'll naturally resist changes that threaten that. This can bog down decision-making, starve reforms of resources.
And there's a human cost to the change itself, isn't there? Anxiety among employees.
Definitely. Especially if reforms involve things like downsizing. The chapter notes this can increase anxiety, lower morale, even lead to higher turnover. Ironically, losing people you might need for the future. It's a really tricky process.
So how do you manage such difficult, radical reforms, according to the chapter?
Clear, consistent communication from the top is paramount, explaining why the change is necessary, the risks of not changing, having a clear vision and goals for the transformation, and sharing that widely.
And leadership needs to be really visible and supportive.
Absolutely essential. Building trust, keeping communication channels open throughout. Showing progress, celebrating small wins can help maintain momentum and belief in the process.
Are there ways to reduce the pain or risk?
The chapter suggests strategies like a phased approach, breaking the change to smaller steps. Bringing in external experts for guidance can also help navigate tricky spots. And, crucially, providing skills training so employees see the change as an opportunity for growth, not just a threat.
And I'm guessing trying to shift the culture alongside the structure.
Exactly. Fostering that culture that embraces challenges, learns from failure. Leaders need to model this behavior and create an environment where people feel safer trying new things, even during a disruptive transformation.
It sounds incredibly challenging, a real balancing act. Okay, let's pull all these threads together for the final overarching theme, the burden on future generations.
This is really the culmination of all the previous points, isn't it?
Yeah.
The chapter argues that the systems, the cultures established back then, have collectively created this significant interconnected set of challenges that now weigh heavily on younger and future generations in Japan.
Can you give some examples of that burden?
Well, there's the sustainability of Social Security. An aging population, shrinking workforce, it means younger people have to shoulder a growing financial cost. Then the environmental problems we started with, climate change, pollutions, the cleanup costs and adaptation efforts fall largely on the future.
And the labor market issues we discussed.
Yes, the rigidity there, lifetime employment for some, but precarious non-regular work for many others. The seniority system blocking younger talent. It threatens the economic stability and prospects of those entering the workforce now and later.
The chapter also mentions broader societal risks.
Things like potentially eroding trust between generations, declining birth rates, which are partly linked to economic insecurity, increased pressure for immigration, and the risk of slower economic growth overall because of all these constraints. It's a concerning picture of inherited challenges.
So, what's the path forward? How can this burden be alleviated?
The chapter calls for fundamental reviews of those existing systems, making Social Security more sustainable and fairer in how burdens are shared, accelerating the shift to renewables, better waste management to tackle the environmental legacy,
And fixing the labor market.
big focus there. Reforms promoting flexible work, real career development for everyone, including proper treatment and opportunities for non-regular workers, strong reskilling programs, and transforming corporate culture to genuinely prioritize performance, diversity, adaptability.
It sounds like it requires cooperation across generations.
Absolutely. The chapter stresses this. The baby boomer generation needs to actively support the next generation in making these changes. And fostering a positive, resilient mindset among younger people to tackle these challenges head-on is also key.
So, to really lift this burden, it requires deep, comprehensive action across the board, a shared responsibility.
That's the concluding message, really. It forces us, I think, to reflect deeply on how decisions made in one era ripple outwards, shaping the present and future in profound ways.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? What lessons can we take from this analysis as we try to build better, more sustainable, more equitable systems moving forward, wherever we are?
It definitely prompts that kind of personal reflection on the long-term consequences of the choices we're all making right now.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.